Before we start, we have two events coming up in June that our East Coast and West Coast listeners should know about. On June 15th, Postscript Media is holding Transition AI Boston. It's a one-day conference in downtown Boston digging deep into the applications for artificial intelligence in the energy system. We're going to have panels, networking, and a workshop on ChatGPT. Speakers include Priya Donti, the co-founder and executive director of Climate Change AI, Pamela Esom, who is the former executive director of AI and technology at the U.S. Department of Energy, Patrick Walsh, a general partner at National Grid Partners, and Savannah Goodman, the data and software climate solutions lead at Google. So if you're in the business of energy and climate tech and a better understanding of AI is important to your job, you should come to the event. Again, downtown Boston, June 15th. Our listeners get a 20% discount. Follow the link in the show notes and use the code PSPODS20 when you buy your ticket. And for those of you over on the West Coast, our friends at Canary Media are hosting their next live event in Seattle on June 28th. It's going to be a good one. I can attest. I've done multiple events with Canary, and Canary Live Seattle is going to feature some of the biggest names in our industry, like Amy Harder, David Roberts, Ramez Nam, as well as Canary's executive editor, Lisa Hymas. The venue is the legendary radio station KEXP in downtown Seattle, and you can expect some amazing panels and lively networking. Again, we've done multiple shows with Canary. The Canary Live events are incredible, so go check it out. canarymedia.com/Seattle to get your tickets today. Don't miss out on either of these events.
From the studios of Postscript Media and Canary Media.
As I record this, there's still no agreement on raising the debt ceiling here in America. That's the limit on borrowing for the U.S. Treasury. And if it's not adjusted upward soon, the government could default on its debt. That could happen in June. And what that really means is that we won't have enough money to pay for programs like Social Security, Medicare, food assistance, farm loans, air traffic control, parts of the military. It would also damage our credit rating, increase the cost to borrow, and, throw the national economy into recession, potentially. The stakes are incredibly high, and that is certainly true for the clean energy industry. Republicans with a slim majority in the House of Representatives want to slash spending before agreeing to raise the debt limit. And part of that plan, unveiled in April, includes gutting incentives for clean energy manufacturing, electric vehicles, and renewables projects through the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden said hell no to that one. Negotiations are ongoing. It's possible a deal will be struck soon. I've heard from a couple people who think the IRA will remain untouched, but I've also talked to a couple companies who are holding any investments until this problem is resolved. In any case, even if these are hollow threats, they are just economically insane. According to the Financial Times, Republican-held congressional districts are getting 5 times more funding for clean energy projects, including new manufacturing plants, than ones controlled by Democrats through this IRA legislation. That's 77,000 jobs hanging in the balance in Republican districts. And thanks to the IRA, a lot of activity is already happening.
So the U.S. Department of Energy has estimated that 13 battery gigafactories have been announced in the U.S. That's from earlier this year. That's huge.
Shalini Ramanathan is the director of origination at Quinbrook Infrastructure Partners. She goes out and finds large projects worth investing in, and she's paying close attention to the surge of new manufacturing plans since the IRA was passed last year.
If you have solar manufacturing know-how, the U.S. is a great place to do business right now. So we saw Longi announce a deal, a 5-gigawatt project as the solar plant in Ohio. Invenergy is going to be an anchor customer for that, but it'll serve other customers as well. So solar batteries, huge opportunities to create here, and manufacture here, and then capture that value.
In the 9 months since the IRA was signed into law, $28 billion in new manufacturing investments have been unveiled. Credit Suisse expects the IRA to support $1.7 trillion in new manufacturing in a decade. And Shalini is watching the space, eager to see the growth, but also eager to see a whole new category of customers, because a green industrial strategy needs green electrons and molecules to run it.
we're all asking the question, now that we have low-cost green power, what can we do with it? What other sectors can we decarbonize? What new products can we make? And that's not a conversation any of us were having, except conceptually 15 years ago. On that basis alone, the U.S. just has a competitive advantage in siting of a lot of these plants and in, new industries like green hydrogen.
The wave of planned build-outs in U.S. manufacturing is setting the stage for a new class of renewables designed to run those plants, and it could shift how and where projects get built.
So I think the reason to care is because this could really reshape our landscape.
This is The Carbon Copy. I'm Stephen Lacey. This week, a second-order impact of America's green manufacturing strategy, a coming boom in projects to meet that new industrial demand. We'll ask how renewables, batteries, and hydrogen could meet the moment.
America's green banks are preparing to unleash a wave of capital for clean energy. The Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund invests a historic $27 billion in projects nationwide. This could mobilize up to $150 billion of private capital for solar, storage, efficiency, and electrification in underserved communities. So how do we deploy those billions quickly, efficiently, and with the highest impact? On July 18th, Latitude Media and Banyan Infrastructure will host a virtual event exploring the on-the-ground realities of making America's green banks a success. Register for free by clicking the link in the show notes or go to latitudemedia.com/events.
Clean energy and climate tech are policy-driven industries, and anyone working in this field touches local, state, and federal policy in a very real way. And that's why you should be listening to Political Climate, a podcast from Latitude Media and Boundary Stone Partners that delivers an insider's view on climate policy and politics. Every other week, co-hosts Julia Piper, Emily Domenech, and Brandon Hurlbut cover the nuances of government funding, regulations, backroom negotiations, and the election, of course. Political Climate is a show for people who want authentic conversations and strong opinions from voices across the political spectrum. Listen at latitudemedia.com or subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. A few weeks ago, we had a show about Biden's green industrial strategy. If you haven't heard it, I recommend you go back and check it out. It's kind of about the history and the principles behind that strategy. It'll take some time to really know how it's working, but the early signs are positive. Tens of billions of dollars in new factories, tens of thousands of new jobs, and forecasts for explosive demand in new renewables and storage, assuming we can connect them to the grid, of course. I spoke with Shalini about how this might influence the way projects get built. And we started first with the urgency of building a new green industrial base in the first place.
So China refines 65% of the lithium worldwide, and it may come from other places. A lot of it comes from Australia, but it's refined in China. And that means that if there are trade tensions, they have control over something that is important to the U.S. So that's one big challenge that the IRA tackles. Another one that it tackles are supply chain transparency and supply chain certainty. A lot of polysilicon is right now, it's made in the Uyghur region of China. There are, known human rights abuses, well documented. And by transferring the polysilicon supply chain, to the U.S. and other countries that we're on, better terms with, we protect ourselves from the charges of, labor abuses. And, we live up to our ESG policies. We also just have greater supply chain certainty if we are manufacturing in the U.S. Because, we've seen during the COVID lockdown how just-in-time manufacturing works until it doesn't. And it just is a problem that I certainly had on wind and solar and energy storage projects where you couldn't get, key components on time. And so with the IRA, you have this opportunity to really, just manage your supply chain and have greater certainty and, just hopefully avoid a lot of the interruptions. And finally, there's an amazing initiative in the IRA to create jobs in the U.S. And in my long history of renewable energy, we've essentially been buying equipment from other countries, mostly China, and using them here in projects in the U.S. And it's been a climate benefit, but we haven't captured jobs and investment in the U.S. And the IRA, again, it's an audacious policy that tries to knit together all of these different goals, some of which are in tension with each other, right? Because if you want really low-cost green power, creating jobs with prevailing wages and having apprenticeship programs, there's some tension with that. But to me, what's amazing is that the IRA takes climate policy and really just makes it, industrial policy.
This is not a new conversation in the United States. In the wake of the financial crisis, through the stimulus package, we did see increased investments in domestic electric vehicle manufacturing, battery manufacturing, and solar manufacturing, much of it coming through the loan guarantee program. And as a result of other countries, particularly China, investing in those sectors far more than the U.S. could, we lost that part of the race. How would you compare what is happening today to some of those earlier green industrial efforts?
Well, it certainly builds on them. And I think one of the advantages we have today is that we have more solar and wind and energy storage installed. The industries are more mature. And I think that has built the political support for industrial policy. It doesn't seem as far-fetched as maybe it seemed, 30 years ago, to say that clean energy could be the basis of a lot of new industry. So I think we built on everything that's happened in the past and helped enormously by the progress made.
So one of the reasons why we're having this conversation is because we want to explore how to serve that industrial base with more clean energy. And now that we have all this clean, cheap, abundant energy, how do you use it effectively so that you can make sure that green industrial base is actually green itself when you're producing all these products? So this is something that you have been thinking a lot about. What kind of opportunity do you think it opens up for renewable energy development as new projects start to get into the queue?
It opens up, in a geographic sense, new locations. One of the challenges of renewable power development in my long history with it is that the places where the solar and wind resource are the strongest isn't necessarily where you have people, or factories that need power. So the split between generation and load, as we think about it, is really a challenge, because then you have to transmit that power, and you incur costs along the way, and the transmission may not be there. What's exciting about expanding the manufacturing base in the U.S. is that you now can perhaps site renewable power projects in locations that you couldn't before, because there was no economic activity there before, and you were taking the risk that you could produce low-cost power, but there was no one that you could really sell it to, which isn't a great business decision. So I think it really unlocks a lot of exciting opportunities in terms of location and in terms of a diversification of generation, so that, we don't have all the renewable power developers, I've done it too, all chasing the same number of projects, outside of the Dallas, Texas area, just because that's clearly a load pocket. So I think it's exciting, and it also takes potentially a risk off the table, which is that between generating green power in one location and transmitting it, delivering it, so to speak, it's usually a financial trade. But in that process of getting it to another location, you incur some costs and some bottlenecks, and this siting along with manufacturing, or siting with manufacturing load in mind, could potentially reduce that risk.
So there are other industries that we can look to where we are seeing more sophisticated renewable supply load matching in the data center industry and in the Bitcoin industry at the height of the crypto madness. We did see a lot of projects that were designed to match the needs of Bitcoin miners. So what kind of activity are you seeing in those spaces, and what might we learn from that kind of activity that we could apply to manufacturing?
So there are two things that are worth talking about. The first is that data centers and a lot of the companies that operate data centers have been major buyers of green power. And because they have, gigawatts of power purchase agreements, many of them, Google comes to mind, are really pushing for 24/7 green power, which is to say that a given data center, every hour of power that it consumes off the grid, brown power, should be matched by green power, every hour of it, right? And that's really different from saying that in the aggregate, all the power that's consumed is matched by what's produced. They're really focusing on that matching. And we think about this a lot at Quinbrook, and one of my colleagues calls it the missing hours problem, because you inevitably will have a few hours where wind or solar or battery storage are too expensive, and so that matching that 24/7 profile becomes a challenge. And this is an ongoing area, of innovation. So we'll see what we figure out. In terms of Bitcoin, I think one of the reasons that cryptocurrency is interesting is because it's interruptible load. And so, the crypto mining facilities are happy to use your low-cost green power and then go offline when it makes more sense to sell that green power. And that doesn't have to be specific to crypto mining. There are perhaps other facilities that can follow renewable generation instead of just using power whenever they need it and, trying to match their usage profile. So I think there are lessons to be learned from, existing experience with green power procurement.
On July 18th, join Latitude Media and Banyan Infrastructure as we take a deep dive into the next phase of deploying the $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We'll provide practical insights for the state agencies and local lenders at the front lines of dispensing these funds. Where are the bottlenecks? How do we balance speed with transparency? And can America's green banks live up to the expectations of both local communities and Wall Street? Latitude Media's Stephen Lacey, Banyan co-founder Amanda Lee, and Clean Energy Fund of Texas EVP Billy Briscoe will answer these questions and more on July 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is a must-attend for project developers and financiers. Register for free at latitudemedia.com/events or click the link in the show notes.
I'm Julia Piper.
I'm Brandon Hurlbut.
And I'm Emily Domenech.
A little over a year ago, political climate took a break so we could focus on the groundwork of implementing America's biggest ever climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. I'm excited to say, political climate is back. And I'll be joined by my two co-hosts to riff on the top political stories and insider scoops, from state houses to the halls of Congress to regulatory agencies and even international climate talks. We'll explain how those developments are driving industry decisions today.
Political Climate is a show for people who want authentic conversations.
And to learn about how energy and climate policy is shaped within both political parties, from the people who have actually helped shape it.
So join me, Brandon, and Emily every other week, starting in April, for fresh episodes of Political Climate. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
So what are the innovations that make it possible? Is it just like contracting, or is it actual delivery of the energy? Where do the innovations need to happen?
There are definitely some technology innovations. Like, I think long duration batteries are interesting and worth watching, and there's some exciting things happening in that sector. There are also, I'm not going to call it an innovation, but some advances in contracting, where, if you have trading desks that can match up power from different projects. And I also think that green hydrogen could potentially have a role to play. It's early days for green hydrogen. As much as I love talking about it, it's worth noting. It's just really at its start as an industry, but you could have green hydrogen providing backup power to fuel cells, and that would be a way of getting to 24/7 power. I'm not offering to sign any contracts for that today, but we're thinking about it.
So what are the kinds of projects that you might see? Do you think they'll be weighted in the wind space? Will they be weighted in the solar space? Will it be a combination of hybrid projects? How do you see, conventional renewables and batteries serving those loads? And then are there other technologies you see coming in to fill the gap as well?
First of all, I love the phrase conventional renewables because, when I started working, we were called alternative energy, right? So the fact that it's now conventional renewables is, huge progress. Very excited. So I think we'll see, it'll depend on where the new load goes and where the needs are. So if you're going to be, developing a project in the Southeast, of the U.S., that is probably going to be solar. There are only really a handful of pockets lots of wind resource there. I also think that, so the resource is going to matter a lot. I also think that the profile of each individual user, of each individual manufacturing plant is going to matter a lot. Are you able to run at night? That might argue for wind. Do you need to be online during peak power? Is it a batch processing plant or continuous? So I think it'll be a combination of everything, but fundamentally it will have to be based on, what is available and what is low cost. Because one thing that, it's worth focusing on is, manufacturing as a sector is hugely price sensitive. People notice when the cost of a component goes up. So I think the power has to be, green, but also low cost, and that's going to determine what's developed.
There's also another question about heat. How much of that are you paying attention to?
We are very focused on green hydrogen as a solution to the, thermal problem because, look, we want to electrify everything we can and then make sure that electricity is provided with green power, electrify and then decarbonize. But there are some things that you can't directly electrify. And, steel, cement, there are these hard to abate sectors. And I think that green hydrogen, we're going to need a molecule. It's probably not going to be an electron, it'll be a molecule. And right now it looks like green hydrogen, thanks in part to the, incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act, is a leading candidate to address that. And it also has a huge impact on what you can do because if you have low-cost green hydrogen, you can then, have heavy industry in a cost-competitive way.
And if we do get this right, what do you think our green industrial sector will look like in the country?
I think that the biggest change is that instead of just buying equipment to make, to build projects, we're actually manufacturing equipment and actually a little bit more in control of our destiny and a little bit less worried about supply chain interruptions. I think anyone who's been working to deliver a project in the past few years has really seen how interruptions in supply chain can create real hassles and increase the price. And I think by controlling more of the supply chain and, instead of buying the components we need, making them, we just capture more of the value. I think it leads to a lot of wealth creation. The U.S. now has two advantages. It has, on the whole, on a global basis, low-cost green power, and it has the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. And that means that it's going to be really hard to beat the U.S. as a location for manufacturing. The low-cost green power, that's directly a result of the fact that we've installed gigawatts worth of projects. That, didn't happen overnight. It happened because of, all the hard work of the industry to getting steel in the ground. And those two factors, along with, the fact that we have talented workforce, we have universities, it feels like a lot of things are aligning to create change right now.
Shalini Ramanathan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for the show. The Carbon Copy is a co-production of Postscript Media and Canary Media. Don't forget, we are both holding events for East Coast and West Coast listeners. We've got Transition AI on June 15th in Boston. Go to the link in the show notes to get your ticket now. We're going to have venture investors, utilities, startups, AI experts, and then Canary Live Seattle as well, June 28th. That's going to be at KEXP in Seattle, and they've got some awesome people, including Ramez Nam and David Roberts there, and some Canary editors. So go to the show notes. You can find both events there. The episode this week was produced by me with support from Dalvin Abawaje. Sean Marquand is our engineer. Original music comes from Echo Finch and Blue Dot Sessions. And Postscript Media is supported by Prelude Ventures. Prelude is a venture capital firm that partners with startups, entrepreneurs to address climate change across energy, food, ag, transportation, materials, manufacturing, and advanced computing. Give us a rating and review on Apple or Spotify. Pass the link around on social media or to a friend and colleague. And thanks. I'm Stephen Lacey. This is The Carbon Copy.